The ship moved through space like a ghost, silent and invisible to the primitive world below. Commander Helena Price stood at the observation window of the exploration vessel Pathfinder, watching the blue and green planet rotate slowly beneath her. She had seen thousands of worlds in her career. This one was different only because nobody had bothered to notice it existed. Earth. That was what its inhabitants called it. A simple name for a simple place. The data from the long-range sensors filled the screens around her with useless information. Thermal readings showed industrial activity across multiple continents. Radio waves leaked into space like a child crying for attention. The civilization down there had not even figured out how to contain their own communications. They broadcast their location to anyone willing to listen. Helena was 53 years old. She had spent 30 years exploring the edges of known space. She had made first contact with the Kellian traders, negotiated with the Vrax Collective, and documented the collapse of 3 Maya civilizations. Nothing surprised her anymore. The pattern never changed. Species climbed their gravity wells. They played with fire for a few thousand years. They either destroyed themselves or they begged to join the Empire. Earth would follow the same path. They always did. Kevin Martinez, her second officer, worked at the sensor station. He was young, still believing that exploration meant discovery. He had not yet learned that the galaxy was already known and mapped and sorted into its proper place. Kevin looked up from his work and called out to her. "Commander, you should see this," he said. Helena turned from the window. She had hoped for peace on this patrol. She was tired of young officers finding interesting data that turned out to be meaningless. She walked to his station anyway. Command meant listening, even when you did not want to. Kevin highlighted 3 separate areas on the planetary map. "These are their major military concentrations," he explained. "See the pattern? They have war machinery stationed across this entire region. Multiple nations with nuclear weapons." Helena nodded. She had seen this before. Developing species usually destroyed themselves with nuclear weapons. If these humans had not done it yet, it meant they had simply gotten lucky so far. Luck did not last forever. They could wipe out their own civilization, Kevin continued, his voice urgent. "Multiple times over. Look at these calculations. The destructive power they have accumulated could end all intelligent life on their world. Most developing species acquire this capability," Helena said flatly. "They rarely use it, but why?" Kevin asked. "Why do they not destroy themselves?" Helena turned away from the screen. She did not have time for philosophy. The mission was simple: observe, record, report. She had no interest in understanding why primitive humans chose not to annihilate themselves. Understanding implied caring. She cared only about completing the patrol and moving on. "Because they have not reached the critical moment yet," she told Kevin. "Give them another 100 years. Either they will solve their differences or they will not. Either way, it will not matter to the Empire." The hours passed. The Pathfinder orbited Earth, gathering data. Helena reviewed the reports. 3 billion humans spread across multiple continents. Thousands of languages and cultures. Religions that promised eternal reward or punishment. Political systems that ranged from democracies to dictatorships. It was chaos. The entire planet was an experiment in how to organize civilization poorly. Then the alert came. It was not a threat alert. It was something else. A ship had launched from the planet. A human ship. It was crude, obviously. The technology was backward. But it had left the surface and was now in orbit. A small achievement that meant nothing except that the humans were further along than the reports indicated. "They are faster than we predicted," a junior officer named Susan Williams reported. 5 years ahead of their estimated development timeline. "Maybe more," Helena watched the small ship move through space. It was a pathetic thing. The engine design was wasteful. The hull would never survive the radiation of deep space. These humans were children playing with matches, thinking they had invented fire. But Kevin was right about one thing. They were tenacious. The species had spread itself across every continent on their world. They had built cities in the harshest environments. Mountains, deserts, oceans. They refused to accept limits. They kept trying even when failure seemed guaranteed. It was an interesting characteristic. It meant nothing, but it was interesting. Helena sent the standard reports up the chain of command. Nothing serious. A primitive species with primitive ambitions. They would be observed. They would be monitored. In perhaps 100 years, they would be contacted. At that point, they would either accept Empire protection or they would be left alone. The outcome was predetermined. The Empire had seen this play out 1,000 times. What Helena did not know, what the Empire's vast surveillance network had somehow missed, was that the humans had been aware of alien life for decades. Scientists on Earth had decoded the mathematical messages hidden in cosmic radiation. Physicists had figured out the equations for weapons that could destroy solar systems. Military strategists on the planet had spent years studying the fragments of information humanity could gather about the galaxy beyond. The humans knew they were being watched. They knew they were being judged. And they had made a choice that the Empire had never expected. They decided they were not going to be judged as primitive anymore. The Pathfinder continued its orbit, recording data, watching the small blue world spin below. Helena had no way of knowing that she had just made the first contact in what would become the most significant conflict in galactic history. She had no idea that the humans below had decided this day was the day everything changed. She simply logged the observations and prepared to move on. Other worlds waited. Other primitive species waited to be cataloged and filed away. The Empire had made a decision about Earth a long time ago. Earth had made a different decision about itself. History would remember which one was correct. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in a military installation buried under a mountain in North America, Admiral Emma Holloway stood before a wall of screens showing real-time data from space. Every screen displayed the same image. The ship orbiting their world. The Pathfinder. The vessel that belonged to the galactic power that considered humanity too primitive to matter. Emma was 48 years old. She had spent the last 15 years preparing for this moment. She had been a fighter pilot when scientists first decoded the alien messages. She had been a squadron leader when physicists figured out what the equations meant. Now she was the military commander of United Earth, a rank that had not existed 2 years ago. She was the person who had convinced every major nation on the planet to pool their weapons, their knowledge, and their will into a single unified defense force that no one believed her at first. War had shaped human history for thousands of years. Nations fought nations. Religions fought religions. Ideologies fought each other while the planet burned. The idea that humanity would unite against an external enemy had always been a dream. Emma had made it real. She had shown them the numbers. She had explained what the mathematical messages from space really meant. She had described the Galactic Empire and its methods. Cooperation or conquest. Those were always the choices for species that met the Empire. Emma had told every world leader the same thing. Unite or be conquered separately. It had taken 5 years of argument. But in the end, fear was a better unifier than hope. Now the first real test was coming. The Pathfinder had been visible for weeks. Earth sensors had tracked it. Military strategists had analyzed its movements. Scientists had argued about what it meant. The conclusion was unavoidable. The Empire was studying them. Emma's communications officer, a tall woman named Patricia Long, turned to face her. "The network is ready," Patricia said. Every facility on the planet is connected. Every scientist, every engineer, every military strategist. We can coordinate a response in real time. And the new weapons? Emma asked. Ready, Patricia confirmed. We built them. The question is whether they will actually work. Emma nodded. This was the gamble. Earth had taken every piece of information it could gather from the ancient signals. Scientists had reconstructed broken equations. Engineers had built weapons based on theory rather than proven technology. If the weapons failed, Earth would have revealed its hand for nothing. The Empire would simply return with overwhelming force and erase human civilization. The alternative was worse. If Earth did nothing, they would be incorporated into the Empire within a generation. Their resources would be taken. Their people would be processed into whatever roles the Empire needed them to fill. Humanity would not end. But everything that made humanity unique would die. Emma had made her choice long ago. She would fight. The transmission came exactly when the calculations predicted. A diplomatic ship was approaching. Small, elegant, obviously confident in its superiority. It requested permission to land at the agreed coordinates. The Empire was following protocol. They were giving humanity the chance to surrender properly. Emma watched the ship descend toward the space station where the diplomats waited. The Valorian ambassador was coming to make the offer. Join the Empire, and Earth would receive protection and technology. Refuse, and Earth would remain primitive and alone. The ambassador was named Lucas Chun. His file told Emma everything she needed to know. Ancient species. Perfect diplomatic record. Never met a developing civilization that did not accept the terms. He was confident. He believed in the system. He believed that resistance was impossible. Emma watched the diplomatic meeting unfold on screens. Ambassador Lucas Chun sat across from Captain Emma Holloway, who was no relation but shared the same last name as one of Earth's early explorers. The captain was the face of Earth's government, the one who would listen to the offer. Lucas spoke with the certainty of someone who had made this same speech 1,000 times. The Empire is vast. The Empire is old. Resistance is not possible. Join or accept isolation. Captain Holloway listened politely. Then she asked the question that Emma had instructed her to ask. What happens if we refuse? Lucas paused. The question was not conventional. Most species thanked the Empire for the offer and accepted terms. This pause, this hesitation, meant something. You will be left as you are, Lucas finally answered. Unable to advance. Unable to participate in galactic society. In other words, one of the captain's advisors said, You keep superior technology for yourselves, and we stay trapped on our planet. That is one interpretation, Lucas acknowledged. Emma watched Lucas's face on the screen. She saw the moment he truly looked at the humans for the first time. Not as primitives to be catalogued, as people making a choice. It was a moment of genuine connection. And then it passed. Lucas did not believe they could refuse. The Empire had never been refused. It was not possible. When Lucas returned to the Pathfinder, he carried a report that he believed was accurate. The humans were stubborn but ultimately harmless. They would come around. They always did. Emma received the word through secure channels. The diplomat had returned. The offer had been made and rejected. It was time. The attack happened in the space above Earth. 16 human military vessels that had been hidden in the shadow of the moon emerged into active space. They moved with perfect coordination, guided by quantum-encrypted communications that the Empire's systems could not penetrate. The weapons were crude but effective. They did not try to match the Pathfinder's shields. Instead, they targeted the power systems directly. The Pathfinder tried to communicate. It tried to establish defensive formations. It was a vessel designed to explore, not to fight a desperate battle against an enemy with nothing to lose. The engagement lasted 6 hours. The Pathfinder sustained damage, then more damage, then critical damage. Its captain signaled surrender. It was not brave or honorable. It was practical. The Pathfinder's crew did not die for the Empire's pride. They accepted the loss. Emma watched the victory on the screens. Humanity had won. A ship of the Galactic Empire had surrendered to a world that was supposed to be primitive. She did not celebrate. This victory meant the Empire would send a much larger fleet. The real war was coming. But for this moment, at least, humanity had proven something that the Empire did not believe was possible. They could fight back. And they could win. The message went out to every human being on Earth. A simple message from Admiral Emma Holloway. We are not primitive. We are not weak. We are human. And we will not accept anything less than our rightful place among the stars. The Pathfinder hung broken in space above their world. History had begun. The news traveled through the Empire's communication network like a disease. A primitive world had attacked an Imperial vessel. Impossible. Unprecedented. And yet the reports were undeniable. The Pathfinder, a ship of the Galactic military, had surrendered to a species that had not reached spacefaring status 3 decades ago. The High Council convened an emergency session. The chamber was built on the capital world, in a structure that had stood for 10,000 years. The counselors were old. Most of them had been alive longer than human civilization had existed. They did not believe in surprises. The galaxy was mapped. Species were catalogued. The order was established. We underestimated them, one counselor said. Her name was Elder Vex, and she had seen civilizations rise and fall across 3,000 years. We made assumptions based on their apparent primitiveness. We were wrong. We must respond, another counselor stated. His name was High Commander Tiarn, and he controlled the military force of the Empire. The Pathfinder's loss is an insult to Imperial authority. Earth must be made an example. Destroy them entirely? Asked Counselor Marcus, the youngest member, only 400 years old. Erase them from existence? If necessary, Terran replied. They have violated the treaty they were offered. Admiral Emma Holloway did not know about the debate happening on the capital world. She was too busy preparing for what she knew was coming. The Empire's response would be overwhelming. Military vessels from across the galaxy would be sent. The attack on Earth would be relentless. But Emma had not been idle. When the Pathfinder's surrender was confirmed, she had already activated a plan that had been years in the making. Humanity had sent a message, not through diplomatic channels, not through conventional military means. A message in the form of information. Emma herself had written a document. It contained detailed analysis of the Galactic Empire's military structure, where the fleets were positioned, what their patterns were, how their communication networks operated. More than that, it contained analysis of their weaknesses. The Empire was vast, which meant it was also slow. It was ancient, which meant it was also predictable. It was confident, which meant it was also blind to threats from the places it did not expect threats. Emma sent that message directly to every military commander in the Empire. She sent it under the title, The Truth About Primitives. The message reached Commander Helena Price on the Pathfinder within hours. She read it in her quarters, her hands shaking as the words displayed on her screen. The information was extensive. The analysis was accurate. Whoever had sent it understood the Empire's military better than any officer she had worked with. The message ended with a statement. Your Empire believes it is inevitable. We believe it is not. Your strength is your age and your confidence. Our strength is our will to refuse the inevitable. This conflict will determine which belief is correct. It was signed simply, Admiral Emma Holloway, United Earth Military Command. The message spread faster than any official transmission. Officers began discussing the data. Scientists began analyzing the conclusions. Strategists began questioning assumptions they had held for centuries. More messages arrived. Not just military analysis. Information about how the Empire had conquered other species. Records of civilizations that had been absorbed into the collective without resistance. Evidence of the system itself, how it worked, how it maintained control. The humans were not threatening military action. They were threatening something far worse to an empire built on the assumption of inevitable victory. They were threatening the truth. Within 2 weeks, the High Council received their answer to the military question. The humans were not attacking. They were not taking military action. They were simply broadcasting information. Public information. Available to every citizen of the Empire and to every allied civilization. The information showed that the Empire was not invincible. It showed that resistance was possible. It showed that young species with nothing to lose could actually defeat old species with everything to protect. The panic started in the outer provinces. Minor species that had always accepted imperial authority began questioning. Why accept status as tributaries if the Empire could be resisted? Why give resources to a power that was not actually inevitable? Within 3 months, 3 separate regions of the Empire were in open rebellion. Not military rebellion at first. Economic rebellion. Diplomatic rebellion. These regions announced they were withdrawing from the collective and forming independent treaties with Earth. The High Council had to make a choice. They could send the military fleet to crush these rebellions and deal with Earth as the originator of the chaos. But that would require spreading their forces thin. It would require leaving the core worlds vulnerable. They could also negotiate. They could offer Earth a position as an equal power, acknowledge their independence, and work to stabilize the rest of the Empire. Admiral Emma Holloway was not in the capital world having these discussions. She was on Earth, coordinating with the global government. She knew what would come next. The Empire would send a negotiation team. They would offer terms that were far better than the destruction she had expected. That was the point. Emma had not wanted to defeat the Empire militarily. Military victory against a galactic power was impossible. Humans did not have the numbers. They did not have the resources. They did not have the time. But humans had something else. They had the ability to destroy the idea that the Empire was inevitable. Once that idea was broken, the system itself would collapse. Not through warfare, but through loss of faith. Captain Emma Holloway received the message from the High Council herself. An official delegation was being sent. They came with authority to negotiate. Not as conquerors offering mercy to primitives, but as equals discussing terms between 2 powers. Emma, read the message to the assembled leaders of Earth. For the first time in human history, the planet was unified not by force, but by choice. Not by conquest, but by the possibility of freedom. She looked at the faces of world leaders who had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment. She saw hope. Real hope, not the soft kind, but the hard kind born from refusing to accept the world as it was supposed to be. They're coming to negotiate, she told them. That means we already won. Now we decide what victory looks like. The Empire did not know it yet, but it was ending. Not through military defeat. Not through destruction. Through the simple, devastating truth that had spread across the galaxy from a blue world in the outer rim. The primitive species could fight. And more importantly, the primitive species had already won. The negotiation took place not on the capital world, but on neutral ground, a space station constructed jointly by representatives of 5 major galactic powers. Admiral Emma Holloway arrived with a small delegation. She was not the most powerful person in the room. She knew she probably never would be. But she was the most important, because she had forced everyone else to acknowledge that the universe had changed. High Commander Terran was there. Elder Vex, ambassadors from 3 other major powers, military commanders, scientists, strategists. They had all come to discuss terms with a species that had not existed in galactic society 2 years ago. Emma was direct. She had learned that diplomacy worked better with humans than with aliens. Humans understood urgency. Humans understood the value of honesty. The Empire is not ending by our request, Emma said at the first session. It is ending because you forced it to. The system you created was built on one assumption, that resistance to the Empire was impossible. We proved resistance was possible. We did not conquer you. We conquered your belief in your own inevitability. Elder Vex studied Emma for a long moment. You understand what you have done? I understand exactly what I have done, Emma replied. I have started a war. Not a military war. A war of ideas. And that war will destroy more than any weapon system ever could. The Empire has stood for 10,000 years, Terran said, anger in his voice. Our civilization spans thousands of worlds. We have resources you cannot imagine. And you want us to simply accept dissolution? I want you to survive, Emma said flatly. The Empire as it exists is not survivable. Every region that was forced to be part of the collective is now questioning that arrangement. Every species that accepted incorporation is now considering rebellion. Your military cannot occupy all of them. Your economy cannot sustain a galactic occupation. Within a generation, your empire will not exist. So your answer is what? Vex asked. War? My answer is choice, Emma said. Humans are leaving Earth. We are reaching into space. We are taking resources, building ships, expanding. We will do this regardless of Empire permission. But we do not have to expand through conquest. We do not have to build an empire our own. We can build something different. Emma displayed a document. She had spent months writing it with advisors from Earth and from the 3 regions that had already broken from the Empire. The document outlined a new structure for galactic civilization. No supreme authority, she explained. No single civilization controlling others. Species remain independent. Trade occurs between equals. Disputes are settled through negotiation, not force. Military action is limited to self-defense. Territory is established and respected. You are describing an alliance of independent powers, Terran observed. It has been tried before. It always fails. It fails when one power becomes too strong and tries to dominate the others, Emma acknowledged. Our system prevents that. No single power can grow strong enough to conquer the rest. We maintain balance through transparency and mutual agreement. And if someone breaks the agreement? Vex asked. Then the rest of us respond, Emma said simply. Together. United against anyone who tries to restore the old system. You kept peace through fear. We keep peace through unity. Both methods work. The difference is what happens when peace breaks. The negotiations lasted 3 months. The terms were complex. The Empire would be reorganized. Its military would be drastically reduced. Its territorial holdings would be adjusted. Species that wanted to leave would be allowed to leave. Those that wanted to stay could stay, but on different terms. They would be protected, but not controlled. Earth would be granted full membership in the new Galactic Cooperative. Not a lesser position. Not a tributary. A full member with equal voice in decisions. The debate raged across the Empire. Some worlds wanted to fight. Some wanted to cooperate. Some wanted to withdraw entirely. But the fundamental truth was inescapable. The Empire was ending. The only question was how painfully the transition would be. In the end, the High Council accepted the terms. Not happily. Not because they believed Emma's vision was better, but because the alternative was the complete destruction of civilization as they knew it. Emma returned to Earth a changed person. She had not fought a war. She had not destroyed a military power. She had simply told the truth and let the truth do the work. The construction began immediately. Human shipyards expanded. The resources of 3 broken-away regions of the Empire flowed to Earth. Trade relationships formed with species that had been enslaved by the old system. Technology was shared. Knowledge was exchanged, but not everyone celebrated. Some humans wanted to build a new empire of their own. Some wanted to expand by conquest, to do to other species what had been done to Earth. Emma had to fight her own people as hard as she had fought the Empire. She held a public address on Earth, broadcast to every human on the planet and every member of the new cooperative. "We were given the chance to become the monsters that feared us," Emma said. "We were offered the power to create our own empire. We could have taken it. No one would have blamed us. No one would have called us wrong. But power is not the purpose. Survival is. And survival only works when everyone survives together." The years passed. Earth became the center of something new. Not an empire. A network. Species traded with each other. Humans explored space with partners from 1,000 different worlds. Technology advanced in ways no single civilization could have achieved alone. The old empire's core worlds struggled. They had to give up their assumption of superiority. But they also discovered something unexpected. Freedom came with their loss of control. They could make their own choices. They could build their own future. Admiral Emma Holloway never wanted to be famous. But history made her famous. She became the person who broke the Galactic Empire. Not through force. Through the simple refusal to accept that the world had to work the way it had always worked. Other species began studying humans. Not to conquer them. To learn from them. How did a species barely out of their own solar system manage to change a galactic civilization? How did they do it without destroying themselves? The answer was simple. They had learned to want something more than victory. They had learned to want freedom. 70 years after the Pathfinder surrendered above Earth, Admiral Emma Holloway stood in a museum built in her honor. She was an old woman now, her hair white, her body marked by decades of work. She had insisted the museum be built not on Earth, but on a neutral station where species from across the cooperative could visit. She wanted them to understand what had happened, not from a human perspective, but as a shared memory of how everything changed. The museum held artifacts of the early days. The original mathematical messages that humans had decoded from the cosmic background radiation. Blueprints of the first weapons built from theory rather than proven science. A recording of the Pathfinder's communication logs from the moment the attack began to the moment it surrendered. Images of every world leader from Earth, unified for the first time in human history. A young student approached Emma as she stood looking at a particular display. The girl was Vraxian, her scaled skin a deep purple, her eyes the color of deep space. She had no way of knowing who Emma was. The museum staff had agreed to keep the Admiral's identity hidden during her visits. Was this person important? The girl asked, pointing to Emma's official portrait from 50 years ago. Emma looked at her own younger face. She saw the determination there and the fear beneath it. She saw a person who had made impossible choices and somehow survived them. She was just someone who refused to give up, Emma answered, even when everything said she should. The girl studied the portrait. The description says she was a human, a primitive human. Primitive is a word that means very little, Emma said gently. It is just another way of saying different, of saying not like us. Humans were never truly primitive. They were just young. The girl considered this. Did her people win the war? No, Emma said. Something better happened. There was no war. Not in the way most people understand it. There was only the truth. The truth that the universe did not work the way people thought it worked. Once everyone saw the truth, everything had to change. The girl left Emma alone with her thoughts. Emma walked through the museum, past displays that told the story of human liberation and the fall of the Galactic Empire. But the museum told only one part of the story. It did not show the hardship that came after. The early years of the new cooperative were not peaceful or easy. Several species tried to seize power in the vacuum left by the Empire's collapse. Wars broke out on dozens of worlds. Trade disputes turned violent. Emma had spent the next 20 years helping establish the structures that could prevent the worst conflicts. She had negotiated with species that wanted to dominate others. She had fought with humans who wanted to build an empire of their own. She had worked with former Empire officials to help them transition to a new system. It had been exhausting work, often thankless, rarely celebrated, but it had worked. Over time, the cooperative became more than just an alternative to the Empire. It became proof that another way was possible. Technology advanced at unprecedented rates because multiple species could share knowledge without fear of exploitation. Medicine improved because 1,000 different approaches to biology could be studied and refined. Art and culture flourished because beings from across the galaxy could meet and create together. Earth prospered. Humans spread into space, establishing colonies on 100 different worlds. They partnered with other species, traded with civilizations that had once seemed impossibly advanced. Some human settlements failed. Some human explorers died. But humans learned and adapted and pushed forward the way they always had. Emma had been offered the position of supreme leader of the cooperative twice. She had refused both times. Power interested her only as a means to prevent others from seizing absolute power. Once that goal was secured, she stepped back. The museum's last section held personal items. Emma's flight uniform from her early military career. A letter written to her by a young human soldier before he died in one of the border conflicts that had erupted after the Empire fell. A small statue created by a Kellyan artist, depicting a human standing next to a creature from a dozen different species, all facing the same direction. Emma read the inscription on the statue. It was written in the standard galactic script, a language that humans had learned only 70 years ago. Those who refuse to accept what cannot be changed. Change what everyone thought could not be changed. A museum worker approached Emma. She was a human. Young, probably born after the fall of the Empire. She did not recognize the old woman standing in front of the display. "May I help you find something?" The worker asked politely. "I was just remembering," Emma said. "When I was young, we thought the galaxy was inevitable. Fixed. We thought we could not change it. We were wrong about that. The Empire was a terrible system," the worker said. "I am glad it is gone." "The Empire was not evil," Emma corrected gently. "It was old. It was comfortable with the way things were. That is often worse than being evil. Evil can be fought. Comfort is much harder to overcome." That night, Emma received a message through secured channels. It came from High Commander Tiarn, now retired from military service, living on one of the old Empire core worlds. He was 87 years old by human standards, ancient by the standards of his people. "I have been watching you at the museum," his message said. "I recognized you. The security feeds identified your biometric patterns. I'm telling you this because I wanted you to know that I have spent the last 70 years working to help the transition succeed. I still believe we were right. But I was wrong about something. I thought the Empire was inevitable. I thought your resistance was impossible. I learned that the things we believe are inevitable are often just the things we have accepted. When you refused acceptance, everything changed. I wanted to tell you that before I die. Thank you for forcing us all to see that change was possible." Emma read the message 3 times. She did not respond. Some acts of reconciliation did not require words. She left the museum as the sun was setting on the station. The view screens showed Earth, a small blue marble suspended in the darkness, no longer alone. Ships from 1,000 different civilizations orbited the planet. Trading posts and research stations filled the space above human lands. The primitive world had become a crossroads where the galaxy came to meet. Emma found a quiet observation deck and sat, watching her homeworld rotate slowly beneath her. She thought about the Pathfinder and its commander. She thought about the diplomats who came to offer humanity incorporation into the Empire. She thought about the choice humans made to refuse. It had been a simple choice in many ways. Not by the standards of galactic politics, but by the standards of her heart. Humans wanted to be free. They wanted to shape their own destiny. They wanted to be treated as equals. These were not complicated wants. They were basic wants, and they were worth fighting for. The Empire had fallen not because humans were stronger, but because humans refused to accept that strength meant control. Because humans offered a different vision of what civilization could be. History books now called it the Human Rebellion. But Emma had never thought of it as a rebellion. She thought of it as an awakening. A moment when the galaxy realized it had been sleeping, and suddenly, everyone was ready to open their eyes. Earth would continue to change. Humans would continue to spread across the stars. Some of them would fail. Some would die. Some would do terrible things and have to answer for those things. But they would do it as free beings, making their own choices, building their own future. That was all Emma had ever wanted. That was all any human had ever wanted. As she watched Earth turn below her, Emma Holloway, the woman who had broken an empire with truth and determination, allowed herself to smile. The blue marble would spin on, no longer afraid, no longer alone, no longer willing to accept that its future belonged to anyone but itself. History had been written. Now came the hard work of living with what history had created.